Melatonin levels fall markedly after age 60. The pineal gland makes less melatonin as we age. Cellular aging and shifts in circadian signaling reduce that production. The result is lighter sleep, more awakenings, less REM, and earlier wake times. Tart cherries contain natural melatonin and antioxidant compounds. Consuming tart cherry or juice raises nighttime melatonin exposure in some studies. That increase is associated with small improvements in total sleep time and sleep efficiency. Watch to see the science broken down simply. Learn what the research actually shows. Get practical, evidence-based tips on timing, forms, and realistic expectations. No promises. Just clear information to help you decide if tart cherry fits your sleep routine. Hook. Sleep changes are biochemical, not personal weakness. Melatonin production by the pineal gland falls with advancing age. The mechanism involves reduced signaling from the suprachiasmatic nucleus, changes in enzymatic activity in the pineal tissue, and altered retinal input to circadian centers. Because the nightly melatonin peak becomes lower and often shifts earlier, the internal signal that promotes consolidated night sleep weakens. The effect is a tendency toward earlier bedtimes and awakenings and a shallower, less robust circadian amplitude. Slow wave, deep sleep diminishes as part of normal aging. Changes in neurochemical systems, reduced GABAergic tone, altered adenosine regulation, and the melatonin decline already described cause less slow-wave activity and more fragmented sleep bouts. As a result, older adults frequently experience shorter stretches of undisturbed sleep and lower sleep efficiency. The practical outcome is lighter sleep and more frequent awakenings, not a moral failing or a lack of effort. Tart cherries, especially Montmorency varieties, contain measurable melatonin and a mix of polyphenol. The mechanism includes direct dietary melatonin intake plus indirect effects from anthocyanins that can modulate inflammation and oxidative stress and possibly influence tryptophan availability. Because consuming tart cherry juice or concentrate raises melatonin metabolites in urine in several studies, the cause-and-effect chain suggests a modest boost to nighttime melatonin signal after evening intake. The observed effects in trials are small but consistent, modest increases in total sleep time and improvements in subjective sleep quality in some groups. Combining dietary sources with behavioral inputs targets multiple mechanisms at once. Increasing daytime bright light exposure strengthens SEN signaling. Reducing evening bright light limits melatonin suppression. When tart cherry is used alongside these measures, the cause reinforcing a weakened biochemical signal can lead to better sleep consolidation for some people. The effect is usually incremental and variable. These physiological shifts explain why many sleep changes after age 60 are biochemical, not evidence of personal weakness. Explain circadian rhythm and pineal gland function. Circadian rhythms are internal biological cycles that run on roughly a 24-hour schedule. They arise from molecular clocks within cells. Mechanism: proteins such as clock and BMAL1 drive transcription of PER and Cry genes, which then inhibit their own transcription in a feedback loop. Cause: this molecular oscillation creates daily peaks and troughs in gene expression. Effect: organisms show predictable changes in behavior and physiology, including sleep-wake timing, hormone secretion, and body temperature. Peripheral tissues like liver and muscle have their own clocks that follow the same molecular mechanism. For example, feeding times can shift liver clock phases without changing the master clock. The suprachiasmatic nucleus acts as the master pacemaker. Mechanism: intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells detect ambient light and send signals along the retinohypothalamic tract to the SCN. Cause: light exposure alters clock gene expression in SCN neurons and changes their firing patterns. Effect: the SCN adjusts the timing of bodily rhythms to match the external day-night cycle, producing phase advances or delays depending on when light occurs. For instance, bright evening light tends to delay the circadian phase and push sleep onset later. The pineal gland produces the hormone melatonin under SCN control. Mechanism: The SCN links to the pineal gland through a multisynaptic sympathetic pathway that runs via the paraventricular nucleus, intermediolateral cell column of the spinal cord, and the superior cervical ganglia. Cause: during darkness, this sympathetic outflow increases activity of serotonin N-acetyltransferase, ANET, and acetylserotonin O-methyltransferase, ACE-MT, in pinealocytes, converting serotonin into melatonin. Effect: melatonin is released into the bloodstream at night, providing a biochemical signal of nighttime to the brain and peripheral organs. People with no light perception can show altered or free-running melatonin rhythms because their SCN receives no light cues. Melatonin acts through specific receptors and feedback on the clock system. Mechanism: melatonin binds MT1 and MT2 receptors in the SCN and other tissues, influencing neuronal activity and clock gene expression. Cause: nocturnal melatonin elevation lowers physiological arousal and helps shift circadian phase when given at certain times. Effect: melatonin contributes to the timing of sleep propensity and helps synchronize peripheral clocks to the central pacemaker. In practical terms, exposure to light at night suppresses melatonin and can shift sleep timing, while darkness permits normal nocturnal melatonin secretion and stable circadian alignment. Describe melatonin decline with aging. Melatonin is produced by the pineal gland in a rhythm tied to the internal circadian clock. The mechanism relies on nightly activation of key enzymes that convert serotonin into melatonin. Age-related changes reduce enzyme activity and pineal responsiveness. The cause includes progressive pineal gland alterations and biochemical shifts in precursor availability. The effect is a blunted nocturnal surge and lower overall circulating melatonin at night, as seen in plasma and salivary measurements. Central clock signaling also changes with age. The suprachiasmatic nucleus shows altered neuronal output and weaker signals to the pineal gland. This causes less robust nighttime stimulation of melatonin synthesis. The effect commonly appears as a reduced amplitude and sometimes an earlier timing of the melatonin rhythm, which correlates with earlier sleep and wake patterns in many older adults. Sensory and peripheral inputs contribute as well. The eyes transmit short-wavelength light to retinal ganglion cells that entrain the clock. Age-related lens changes and loss of photosensitive retinal cells reduce that input. The cause, therefore, includes diminished light-driven entrainment. The effect is weaker synchronization of melatonin timing to the external light, dark cycle, and more variable nocturnal melatonin levels between individuals. Health conditions, medications, and lifestyle further modify melatonin production. Chronic illness, use of certain drugs, and nighttime light exposure blunt nocturnal melatonin peaks by interfering with synthesis or signaling pathways. The cause is multifactorial and cumulative. The effect is measurable: lower overnight urinary 6-sulfatoxymelatonin excretion and flatter salivary/plasma profiles in many older people, although substantial individual differences remain. Connect to fragmented sleep and slow-wave reduction. Melatonin secretion declines with advancing age, and this reduction is especially evident after about 60. The pineal gland normally releases melatonin at night to signal biological night. Lower nocturnal melatonin amplitude weakens the circadian cue that helps keep sleep consolidated, causing more frequent arousals and fragmented sleep. Melatonin acts on SCN output and downstream sleep-promoting circuits to stabilize sleep onset and continuity. Reduced melatonin signaling diminishes the strength of those stabilizing signals. The result is a higher probability of transitions from deep sleep to lighter stages or wakefulness, producing shorter, uninterrupted sleep bouts. Slow-wave sleep depends on both homeostatic pressure and coordinated thalamocortical oscillations. Melatonin influences thermoregulation and GABRG tone, which support those oscillations. When melatonin falls, the environment for sustained slow waves becomes less favorable, so slow wave amplitude and total slow wave time tend to decrease. Fragmentation and slow wave reduction interact in a feedback loop. More awakenings interrupt slow wave consolidation, and less slow wave sleep lower sleep depth, making further awakenings easier. This cycle leads to more fragmented nights and a measurable decline in restorative slow-wave features across older adults. Other age-related changes amplify the effect of melatonin loss. Reduced circadian amplitude from SCN changes, comorbid sleep disorders, and increased nighttime awakenings for physiological reasons all raise vulnerability to fragmentation. Lower melatonin simply removes one of the physiological buffers that used to protect deep sleep against these perturbations. Tart cherries contain naturally occurring melatonin along with anthocyanins and other polyphenol. Dietary melatonin from tart cherry can modestly increase circulating melatonin levels in the evening. That increase may reinforce the nocturnal biological signal, helping sleep consolidation and reducing the frequency of brief arousals for some people. Through anti-inflammatory and antioxidant pathways, tart cherry components can also reduce nocturnal discomfort or pain that contributes to awakenings. By lowering a source of sleep disturbance, the overall environment for slow-wave generation improves. Consequently, some trials report modest improvements in sleep continuity and small increases in total sleep time when tart cherry products are used as part of an evening routine. Effects are typically modest and individual. Practical considerations include timing intake in the hours before bed to align with endogenous melatonin rise and accounting for other sleep-influencing factors such as light exposure, caffeine, and medications. Discussing tart cherry use with a clinician is sensible if someone is already using melatonin supplements or other sleep-altering drugs. Introduce tart cherry as natural melatonin source. Montmorency tart cherries and several other sour varieties contain measurable melatonin along with anthocyanins and other polyphenol. Mechanism: the fruit synthesizes melatonin as part of its metabolic profile. Cause, when consumed, that melatonin can be absorbed through the gut and appear in the bloodstream or as a metabolite in urine. Effect: this provides a low-dose, food-based source of melatonin that can contribute to the nocturnal signal to the brain's circadian system. Tart cherry products come in several forms: fresh fruit, canned or bottled juice, concentrated juice, freeze-dried powder, and supplements. Mechanism: different matrices alter the rate and extent of melatonin release and absorption. Cause: liquid forms tend to allow faster uptake, while whole fruit delivers fiber and additional phytochemicals that slow digestion. Effect: timing and magnitude of the melatonin signal differ by form, so evening consumption of a rapid absorption product will generally align more closely with the body's natural melatonin rise than a morning serving of whole fruit. The cherries also contain anthocyanins and other antioxidants that interact with sleep physiology. Mechanism: these compounds can affect inflammatory pathways and oxidative stress and may influence enzymes involved in hormone metabolism. Cause: lower inflammation and altered metabolic clearance can prolong melatonin's presence or enhance its functional impact at melatonin receptors. Effect: the combined presence of melatonin plus supportive phytochemicals may produce modest improvements in sleep latency, total sleep time, and sleep efficiency for some people. Practical use depends on dose, form, and timing. Mechanism: an exogenous melatonin signal works best when it supplements an existing circadian rhythm rather than overwhelming it. Cause: consuming a tart cherry product in the evening, close to habitual bedtime, increases the chance that cherry-derived melatonin coincides with the body's endogenous signals. Effect: this approach may help older adults with lower endogenous melatonin to achieve small, meaningful changes in sleep continuity and onset, though responses vary. Variability in melatonin content and individual response is common. Mechanism: cultivar, ripeness, processing, and storage all influence how much melatonin remains in the final product. Cause: inconsistent melatonin content leads to inconsistent physiological exposure after ingestion. Effect: results across people and studies are mixed. Some individuals report improved sleep, while others see little change. Consider product labels, personal sensitivity, and possible interactions with medications when evaluating tart cherry as a dietary source of melatonin. Clarify magnitude of effect versus supplementation. Melatonin production by the pineal gland falls with advancing age, and the decline is most noticeable after age 60. Mechanism: reduced pineal responsiveness to the central circadian pacemaker and structural changes in the gland lower nocturnal melatonin amplitude. Cause: this yields smaller nighttime peaks and a blunted circadian signal. Effect: older adults commonly experience later or fragmented sleep timing and reduced sleep consolidation. Tart cherries contain measurable melatonin and other bioactive compounds. Mechanism: eating or drinking tart cherry products delivers food-based melatonin into the circulation and provides antioxidants that can influence sleep-related physiology. Cause: the amount of melatonin in a serving of tart cherry is modest and variable, depending on cultivar and processing. Effect: circulating melatonin rises slightly after consumption, producing small, often subjective improvements in sleep duration and sleep quality in some trials. Melatonin supplements deliver a controlled, higher dose than food sources. Mechanism: supplemental melatonin provides a pharmacologic bolus that raises plasma melatonin to levels typically above those achieved from food. Cause: this produces a stronger, more reliable signal to the circadian system and sleep-wake centers. Effect: supplementation more consistently shortens sleep latency and increases total sleep time than dietary melatonin, though effects remain modest and individual responses vary. Comparative magnitude: the gap is substantial. Mechanism: tart cherry supplies low, food-level melatonin and variable cofactors, while supplements provide defined milligram doses. Cause: variability in fruit melatonin content and bioavailability limits the size and predictability of tart cherry effects. Effect: tart cherry tends to give mild benefit for some people. Supplemental melatonin gives larger and more predictable changes in sleep timing and consolidation. Evidence from clinical trials supports this hierarchy of effect. Mechanism: randomized studies of tart cherry products report modest gains in total sleep time and subjective sleep measures in older adults. Cause: the melatonin and polyphenol in the juice or concentrate likely drive these small improvements. Effect: those improvements are smaller and less consistent than effects reported in trials and meta-analyses of melatonin supplements, which show more reliable reductions in sleep latency and modest increases in sleep duration. Practical implications follow from these mechanistic differences. Mechanism: tart cherry offers a low-dose, dietary approach with minimal dosing control and added nutritional benefits. Cause: this makes it suitable as a gentle adjunct or lifestyle option for older adults seeking small improvements without committing to exogenous hormones. Effect: those needing larger or more predictable changes should consider supervised melatonin supplementation, with attention to timing, dose, and possible interactions with other medications. Address sleep hygiene variables. Exposure to bright or blue-rich light at night suppresses melatonin via intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells that signal the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This neural mechanism alters circadian timing. When people use backlit devices or sit in brightly lit rooms in the evening, the cause is increased retinal stimulation. The effect is delayed sleep onset and reduced sleep continuity for many individuals. Consistent sleep and wake times stabilize the circadian pacemaker by reinforcing daily entrainment cues to the brain. Irregular schedules cause internal circadian drift through reduced predictability of light and activity signals. The result is more fragmented sleep and morning grogginess on days after variable bedtimes and wake times. A cool sleeping environment supports the thermoregulatory drop in core body temperature that facilitates sleep onset. The mechanism is temperature-dependent modulation of hypothalamic sleep centers. When bedrooms are too warm or bedding traps heat, the cause is impaired heat loss. The effect is prolonged time to fall asleep and lighter sleep stages. Noise and intermittent disturbances activate cortical arousal pathways through sudden sensory input. These brief activations cause micro-awakenings that fragment sleep architecture. The consequence is reduced sleep efficiency and daytime sleepiness despite adequate time in bed. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors and reduces homeostatic sleep pressure. Consuming stimulating beverages late in the day causes a lower drive to sleep. The practical effect is difficulty falling asleep and shorter total sleep time. Alcohol produces sedative effects via GABAergic modulation, but later increases sympathetic activation and sleep fragmentation. The mechanism is an initial enhancement of inhibitory tone followed by rebound arousal. Drinking in the evening causes more awakenings in the second half of the night and less restorative REM sleep. Heavy or spicy evening meals activate gastrointestinal and sympathetic systems, interfering with nocturnal rest. The mechanism involves ongoing digestive processes and elevated metabolic arousal. Eating large meals close to bedtime causes more awakenings and discomfort during the night. Long, late-day naps reduce homeostatic sleep pressure by decreasing accumulated adenosine. The mechanism is a reduction in the physiological drive for deep sleep. When daytime naps are long or close to bedtime, the effect is delayed sleep onset and less consolidated nocturnal sleep. Late-night vigorous exercise raises core body temperature and stimulates catecholamine release, which can acutely delay sleep. The mechanism involves thermoregulatory and arousal systems. Performing intense workouts near bedtime causes difficulty initiating sleep, whereas moderate activity earlier in the day tends to improve sleep quality. Screen use in the evening combines bright light exposure with cognitive engagement and emotional arousal. The mechanism is simultaneous melatonin suppression and increased cortical activation. Using devices right before bed causes slower transition to sleep and more nighttime awakenings. A predictable pre-sleep routine lowers physiological arousal through repeated behavioral cues that signal the brain it is time to rest. This conditioning mechanism strengthens associations between certain activities and sleep readiness. The outcome is faster sleep onset and improved subjective sleep quality when wind-down behaviors are consistent. Practical changes are simple. Dim lights and remove bright screens in the evening. Keep bedroom temperature comfortable and reduce noise with earplugs or white noise machines if needed. Avoid large meals, caffeine, and alcohol in the hours before bedtime. Choose daytime exercise and limit long naps late in the day. Adopt a consistent sleep-wake schedule and a short, calming pre-sleep routine to reinforce circadian and homeostatic signals and improve overall sleep continuity. Sleep architecture changes are physiological, not character flaws. Melatonin production falls as people age. The pineal gland produces less of the hormone mechanism because enzyme activity and nightly signaling from the brain's circadian center weaken with age, and this reduces the nocturnal melatonin signal that helps consolidate sleep effect. Older adults commonly show a lower peak and shorter duration of melatonin secretion. That change diminishes the biochemical cue for deep, uninterrupted sleep. Sleep architecture shifts in predictable ways. Brain rhythms that generate slow-wave sleep decrease in amplitude mechanism because thalamocortical and homeostatic sleep processes change with aging, and this results in lighter sleep, more frequent awakenings, and less time spent in deep restorative stages, effect. For example, many older sleepers report waking after short periods and not returning quickly to deep sleep. Circadian timing also advances for many people. Going to bed and waking earlier is a physiological tendency rather than a failing. Tart cherry offers a natural source of melatonin and related compounds. The fruit contains measurable melatonin and polyphenol mechanism because plants synthesize melatonin as part of their physiology, and consuming tart cherry products can modestly raise circulating melatonin and alter sleep timing or subjective sleep quality in some studies, effect. Typical forms used in research include juice concentrates and whole fruit preparations. These are dietary options to consider alongside behavioral measures, not substitutes for individualized medical care. Changes in sleep with age are not character flaws. Biological aging alters hormone rhythms and neural circuitry mechanism because cells and regulatory networks change over time, and that produces measurable differences in how sleep is structured and maintained, effect. Framing these changes as normal physiology reduces stigma. It also shifts attention toward practical strategies, such as consistent light exposure during the day, a steady bedtime routine, and modest dietary choices like tart cherry in the evening. which many people use to support nighttime melatonin levels without expecting guarantees. Practical adaptation follows from understanding the biology. Behavioral and dietary steps can address mechanisms of decline, because they influence circadian entrainment and the timing of hormone release, and they may improve sleep continuity or subjective sleep satisfaction for some individuals, effect. Emphasizing that sleep architecture changes are expected helps people prioritize realistic adjustments. It also reframes sleep differences as part of normal aging rather than as personal failure. Mechanism. The pineal gland produces less melatonin with age. This decline becomes noticeable after 60. Effect. Nights become lighter, sleep fragments, and sleep timing can shift earlier. Mechanism. Tart cherries contain natural melatonin and related compounds. Consuming them can raise circulating melatonin modestly and support circadian signals. Effect. This may contribute to more regular sleep timing or small improvements in duration for some people. Summary. Melatonin tends to fall with age, sleep architecture changes, and tart cherry is a natural source that might help. If you notice earlier wake times or lighter sleep, these findings are relevant. If this helped, like and subscribe for clear, evidence-minded updates. Drop questions or topics you want covered in the comments. Talk with your clinician before adding supplements or making major changes. Next video will explore timing, serving ideas, and how tart cherry fits into broader sleep strategies.